Watching.
Joseph Duarte, Houston Chronicle. We've had Joseph on many times back even before the realignment when Houston was added among others. He joins us on 365 Sports. You know, Joseph, we've talked about this game and two bad teams right now, and Houston coming off what happened. Baylor's in a malaise or a free fall. Houston, though, to me, has explosiveness. Is that still what they can go to on occasion?
Well, as long as you're not looking at the Kansas State tape.
Oops.
There's an explosion, but it wasn't the good kind.
You know, at first I was going to say it's sort of insulting Baylor by saying it's two bad teams. There's bad and then there's really bad. And if you go off of last week's Houston performance, it was really bad. But no, to your point, offensively, they do have some explosiveness, and they've showed it at times. They showed it in the West Virginia game. They showed it in the first half against Texas Tech. They showed it in the second half against Texas, where they were able to come back from a 21-0 deficit. But it's just a matter of they haven't put it together. You know, they're kind of like Baylor. They start off slow, but when Donovan Smith has gotten in a rhythm, he's got three really, really good receivers that he goes to. So they don't go for the deep shot as much, but they certainly go with the short passes that they sort of make big yards out of. But it's all in the passing game lately. They don't have much of a running game to speak of.
Do you think that their running game might see some advantages, though, playing one of the worst run defenses in the country in Baylor?
Well, that would be the hope. You know, they have a true freshman, Parker Jenkins, who's settled into that role probably the last 5 games. It has, you know, when you're facing Texas's defensive front, you know, they knew they weren't going to get any yards there, and they didn't. Last week, they got into a situation where they had to throw the ball. So the last 2 weeks, you might kind of throw it as a wash that you didn't really get to see what they wanted to do from a running standpoint. But, this would be the week considering who they're facing and the fact that they would like to get Jenkins and Tony Mathis, who's from West Virginia and is very familiar with Baylor, get those two guys some work out of the backfield.
Joseph, it's been a struggle for Baylor everywhere you look, but offense, I mean, can't run the football, can't pass, all that well. What was Dana's kind of messaging? I know he brought up the whole truck in the parking lot, COVID year. That's still kind of a subplot here. It was that whole fiasco. But, I mean, in terms of just talking about the program, what did he have to say, if anything, about, what he's seen from the Bears or Dave Aranda?
Well, I mean, he wants this to be one of those regular games, and the matrix came out this week from the Big 12, and these schools will play 4 times over the next 4 years, so each of the next 4 years, and that's something that he wants to see. Dana's very well versed with the history and having been in the Big 12, and then also these are schools that at some point they cross paths in recruiting, so. A lot of familiarity, a lot of history between the two programs, and yes, the whole equipment truck fiasco from the COVID year. I try to bait him a little bit, say, hey, when are you sending the truck down this week? And he's like, hey, I'm not going to go there. Mac Rhodes was mad at me last time, and I don't want Mac to be mad at me again this time. So, a lot of history, and a lot of people in Houston, even in a bad year, are looking forward to the games against TCU and Texas Tech, and especially, the one time against Texas and now Baylor. This will complete the reunion tour for this year.
Doesn't that say quite a bit about the respect? Because Holgorsen had the right probably to say what he said, no matter the situation at the time in 2020. But there is a great deal of respect from Pesman and Dana among Kelvin Sampson when it comes to Mac Rhodes.
There is, and for Kelvin, he's good friends with Scott Drew as well. But Mac was at Houston for several years, and he was instrumental in bringing Kelvin on board. He didn't have any, he brought Tom Herman and on board, but Dana's known them. Dana's been in those circles when they meet at the annual meetings. So Mac is very well regarded. A lot of people thought he did a wonderful job there. He was part of when the new football stadium came online and sort of the beginning of the resurrection of the basketball program there. So, it's, and you see what he's doing in Baylor, and I'm sure he's had some opportunities that he could have left or looked for other jobs. And, he's paid very well in Waco. And I think that he he wants to be, for the long haul.
Joseph, what is your now, as we're to the back half of this or part of the season, assessment of Donovan Smith?
The consistency just hasn't been. They've done a better job in pass protection, so that has helped. But he came in as a guy that, he had a lot of experience, but he hadn't been the guy on a team. And we've seen that now. He for a while had done really well protecting the ball, not having turnovers. But the last week he had an interception. He's had a fumble recently. So there's some things that he's still working through. But then you look at his numbers, and I believe he's third in the Big 12 in passing. And he's the last few weeks. He's you take those the Kansas State game out, which was by far the worst game he's had all year. I mean, he's been okay, and this was going to be an important transition from Clayton Tune, and they got it out of that, him and Tank Dell for 2 years, going to the new guy, and there hasn't been a quarterback controversy. And this is Donovan Smith's team, and it will continue to be Donovan Smith's team. It's just a matter of it's taken him some time to sort of get comfortable and feel his way through what this offensive identity be.
So, Joseph, they're entering the final month. They're 3-5, and the final month actually sets up pretty well for them. I mean, as far as opponents go, you got a struggling Baylor, you've got Cincinnati, who you're familiar with, you got UCF. Of course, there's Oklahoma State, which will be at home, and that's a different story. But 3 of those 4 are winnable or familiar. At 3-5 right now, I guess a bowl's not off the table entirely, but it's unlikely. So just where they sit right now and where you expect them to probably finish, how would you sort of gauge the temperature on, what the expectations were going in and how you feel they've fared up to this point in the Big 12?
Well, you're right. The compared to October, November sets up about as well as you can be for a 3-5 team, because you do have the opportunity. You're not looking at staring at, Oklahoma, Texas, and either playing Texas or Kansas State later in the year. So they have that going for them. But this was going to be a rough year to begin with. At the beginning of the year, the athletic director said bowl appearance and just being competitive were sort of the goals, and that it would be a transition year. So I think if you look at the Rice game is the one that could haunt them, and losing that game for many reasons. But if you win that game, you're 4-4 right now, and things really look good for you. And if you beat Baylor this weekend, you're setting up nicely. So that's sort of where people look at this program right now as, the one that got away. They should have had that Rice game. And what does that mean for the future? Dana, the hot seat on him is getting warmer. And last week, when you don't score for the first time in 23 years, it sort of, the knob gets turned up a little bit more. And I think a loss tomorrow would just, and I don't want to say it would be the nail in the coffin, but it certainly wouldn't play well with the alumni base, fan base. It's already at a really high temperature. So they've got to close out, and 5-7. If you're there, maybe that keeps him around. Maybe you have to see which wins they're going to be of that group. But it's certainly, he didn't want to say a must win, but that's where they are right now. These games are all must win.
Okay, so I had it just jotted down just now to ask about the hot seat and how legitimate that was, because, it's been a topic of conversation here for a little while, but you're saying there is something to that. I mean, we know there's some, angst and all that, but I mean, as far as them feeling strongly enough to maybe do something if things don't go right this final month, you do think there is something to that actual conversation?
I do think that there's something to it, and and I'm sure you guys have heard this. The comment that always keeps come up is a few years ago when they had Major Applewhite, the school president came out and said, "We fire coaches that go 8-4."
Yeah.
Well, Houston would take 8-4 right now, to be honest with you. And I think that they've reached a point where they are going to have to look at it. Dana was the choice to come into the Big 12 since he had a history and sort of was able to take them into that. How can you sort of, toe the line between mediocrity and
think we may have lost him. Sounded like he might.
Elephant
There you go. Okay, lost you for a second, Joseph. I'm sorry.
The elephant in the room is the $15 million buyout. That's the big thing. Will they be able to step up, or do they want to step up and pay that amount and make another change? And then the amount of money that it'll take to bring in a new coach and a staff. So a lot of decisions have to be made, and they, I think we'll have a clearer picture in the next 2 weeks with Baylor and Cincinnati. If you lose to both of them, I can see that being it for them, because these are two games that they should be in the running to win.
And that money, to clarify, Joseph, a buyout money, that means that a donor or two, and we know who the big boy is, would write a check, or at least a couple of 5 or 6 of them would. That's not to say, okay, we're finally making pretty good money in the Big 12, but we're going to take $15 million out of that and go pay off a coach, right?
Yeah, that money, as they put it, is not there yet. The checks haven't cleared yet. And an interesting thing in Dana's new contract, that this new contract is only a year in, and it triggered when they got into the Big 12, where it was kind of a good faith. They were going to rework the deal because they got into the Power 5 conference. It's structured now where I believe they wouldn't have to just do a lump sum $15 million. It could be payable in monthly. So it's sort of like you tell them, goodbye, but you'll still pay him for as long as it takes to pay off that amount of money. It's not like it's coming out all at once, but certainly they were a year or two in the Big 12, and those big annual revenue shares were coming in. It would help a little bit more, but this is certainly something that is going to be donor funded and really probably Tillman funded.
Yeah. Joseph, thank you, man. Great to have you in Waco. Welcome, and appreciate your time. Joseph Duarte does a great job, Houston Chronicle, covering University of Houston, the Cougars. And I do